All right. Welcome, guys. Looks like we got a bunch of attendees flooding in. I'm going to give everybody maybe one more minute, and then we'll start right at 8:03, just to be sensitive to your guys' time. So hang tight. One more minute. Let them flood in, and then we'll get it started. While we wait, if anyone can just pop a couple test chats in there to make sure the chat function is working, that'll make sure you can ask questions as we go. We do also have our Residency Hot Topic Slack channel posted there too. If you want to log into that, you're welcome to. All right, chat is working. Thank you, Caleb, for confirming. All right, let's fire this up. So for everyone who is on the call, just know that it is being recorded. Will be sent out to everyone who's registered for the course. This is extremely exciting for me. This is our second Hot Topics, and I love this forum because it pulls together physical therapy residents, faculty, prospective residents, and others to gather, to collaborate, and tackle the hot topics that you guys are all dealing with while connecting with this network of excellence. In the field of PT, those who complete residency is less than 2% in the entire field. So you truly are an elite group, and it's really, really exciting to bring you guys together and talk through the things that are most important. Leading our discussion today are going to be Kelly Starrett and Drew Contreras. So back in 2011, Kelly Starrett came and taught in our orthopedic residency. And when we asked him to come out, he said he would do it for free. And mind you, at the time, he was getting 400 plus requests a year to teach. When I asked him why he wanted to do it for free, which we didn't let him do it for free, by the way, he said because residency and fellowship hadn't really embraced his message yet. This is how innovative he was at that stage and still is, and an inspiration for our entire field. So pumped to have Kelly on board. I recently reconnected with him at CSM, and I noticed when I was at CSM how different the APTA Pavilion looked. There was a different energy about it. There was much different programming. And I immediately asked, who is responsible for this? What has changed here? And everyone said it's Drew Contreras. So Drew joins us with a 20-year plus history of military service, obviously serving our profession at a very high level, and has taken a role which seemed like an oxymoron when I first read it, but it's legit. This is happening. And he's really heading up VP of Clinical Integration and Innovation for APTA. Some initial conversations. It's really exciting what he wants to do, what APTA is interested in doing. And I thought getting these great minds together and going through some important questions, we're hoping to give all of you guys, the elite of our field, a path forward, a vision for what the next 30 years of your life and career might look like in physical therapy. So that is our goal. So without further ado, I'm going to get the first question kicking. The chat is working, so please feel free to put questions in the chat. As these guys start talking, I will be fielding those questions and feeding them back to them. So first question that I wanted to ask you guys, and Kelly, will start with you. For those who have pursued residency and board certification, how do you believe they can make the most out of their elite training?
Well, first of all, thank you for everyone being here. It's a work night. I appreciate it. Just for transparency, Drew is one of my best friends, everybody. So just so you know. Look, we are moving into a place where when I went to physio school, and maybe there are a couple other people who are on here, we were just through the first wave of physio, where we saw the first generation of masters and people who've been carrying the water, digging the trenches, who came out of hydrocolators and diathermy and TENS and massage. And they really had to struggle to put the field into a place where, hey, physicians even knew we existed, that we ended up in hospitals, that you could create your independent clinic and involve that model. And I think what's happened then is that model has become, maybe doesn't serve us as well as it needed to at the time. And so to answer your question, we're suddenly in a place now where I think people who have this level of experience and education and thinking, especially in integrative medicine, are in a position to be leaders, especially in high performance environments, where we are starting to see a much better integration of physio, of ATC, of strength coaches, of nutrition, of sports psych. I'm a volunteer physical therapist at Cal. And right now we don't have sort of that person. That person sort of is an ATC, it's an administrator. But when I go around to the All Blacks this year, the Irish national soccer team, the Niners, we start to see more and more that the person who is leading this sort of organization tends to be a very, very competent generalist, a person who could step into a fitness class, step into a yoga class, step into an Olympic lifting hall and say, hey, I can coach. I won't be the best coach, but I can do all of these things. I can manage someone who is going to the Olympics. I could see a young child on screen. I can really understand the sort of depth and breadth, because that person as a physio suddenly can understand the management of an acute injury or management of how we're going to, hey, this really does seem like a biobehavioral problem where, hey, you're not sleeping, you're under calorie. It turns out you're not burned out, you're just underfed. And now we have this education, and the dirty secret that I hope Drew talks about is that you may not need to be the person putting their hands on. You've now evolved to a place where you could do that job. In fact, you could probably do all the jobs, but you're in a position now where you are skilled enough where you need to oversee those roles. And that's where I'm hoping this next generation of residency trained physio coaches go, is into the role and position where we're managing sort of a high performance team, because I don't think anyone can do it as well as a physio.
Fantastic. Drew, how about you?
I mean, I think that, man, I think, right, that people probably come to the conclusion of doing a residency and fellowship for whatever their reasons are, right? But I think ultimately, all of you guys that did it because you had an itch that needed to be scratched, right? You were slinging patients and you weren't getting the results you wanted. There was something that was bugging you in the back of your mind that you were like, man, I don't quite understand this, and your pursuit of that allowed you, right, to pursue the ridiculousness of like, oh yeah, I'm going to go do this program that's completely optional, right? Nobody's making me do this, but your pursuit of that, I think, speaks to kind of who they are. And like Kel was saying, that self-selection process really makes people, it weeds out who's doing it because it's just a job and who's doing it because they're passionate about it. And I think that those people that pursue that are kind of setting themselves apart. And, you know, as a follow-on, then there's also the, like, once you kind of separate who those folks are, there's also some inherent responsibility with like living up to that, right? With accepting that mantle of leadership and responsibility that you are in the upper 2% of the profession. And you know, and sometimes that's a burden, sometimes that's a fire inside you. It just kind of depends. But you know, I think that's really what speaks to it.
Love it. And Kelly, to go back to your point on leading in a high performance environment, for those who have just graduated from a residency or those who are, you know, early out, how do you see a path like that evolve? Like what happens next? So I graduate from a residency, I finish up this training. I would love to be a leader in a high performance environment. How do I get there?
Well, number one, where are you spending your time and who are you around? So I talk to a lot of young people and a lot of people sort of thinking about what their futures look like. When they ask me, you know, should I get an OCS? Should I go through residency? And I say, well, what job are you looking for? And does this advanced training prepare you for the job you're looking for? Is it a requisite for your job? Is it better served, or are you better served to go and become an expert in strength conditioning or an expert in nutrition, or start to expand sort of your field in terms of understanding the human, understanding the physics, even if it was simple sports psych, understanding those components. If I went back to grad school now, I would go get another degree in sports psychology. I think that this component is a limiting factor, for example. So the first order of business is, if you're just now back in your clinic with your killer set of power tools, you're going to end up doing the same thing the same way, except you've got a killer set of power tools. And maybe your saw's a little, your saw's a little sharper, or maybe your chisel's a little bit cooler, maybe you get someone better to visit. But right now you'll have a unique opportunity to reimagine what you want your practice to look like. We have good examples with Frank Benedetto and Danny Mattei and the work they're doing about saying, hey, look, now we can say, I feel like I have a skill set that's so sophisticated, so advanced. How am I going to create another opportunity for myself? And that might be a side hustle. That might be opening and hanging a shingle in the gym. That might be developing, teaching practicals, working. But if we don't start to knock on the doors, apply for the job, be volunteers in the places we want, and show that we're actually +1 there. And I'll give you an example. I love water polo. My daughters play water polo. 2 of my best friends are the senior coaches underneath the head coach at Cal Women's Water Polo. And I started coming in and volunteering about recovery, positions, pain, nutrition, talking about all these things with the team a little bit. And then that was like, hey, could you be around more? Yes. Could do it. Hey, we really enjoy it. Hey, can I volunteer at this camp? Hey, and suddenly University of California says, because I didn't want to get involved with that bureaucracy, says, hey, who are you? What are we doing here? We need to get you credentialed as a volunteer. And we have all these other teams who want to work with you because we've asked. And because I'm a strength coach, I get invited into the door of talking with the high performance coaches and the high performance staff, not just the ATC staff. So what's nice is having the skill set means suddenly that I'm been volunteering, saying, hey, I want to go spend time in this community. I better make myself known to this community so that I could at least speak to that kind of thing. And if that's not your dream, go find your dream. If it is opening your clinic or something else. But I think what we don't do oftentimes, because we're so scrambling, is think, what would my ideal dream life look like? What does my day-to-day practice look like? What kind of people do I want to work with? What kind of populations do I want to serve? And then start working backwards. And I think we have a real opportunity to start thinking that. And now, where you've just come through residency, or you're already a resident and you are in this leadership expert position, to really start saying, hey, that's the kind of thing I want to do. You know, if you're already, I don't remember, one of my friends in business school right now, young kid, and he's like, they said, if you see the job posting, it's too late. It's already been filled. So go develop those relationships, go cold, go volunteer, go, if you want to be in there, go figure out how to put your foot in the door as your side hustle.
Love it. And Drew, that speaks a lot to what you had brought up as well, and accepting that mantle of responsibility. Can you tell me more about, again, what that path looks like? Resident grad, they've just finished up, or they're a prospective resident, they want to know what happens after that. What does that process of seeking out and accepting that mantle of responsibility look like?
Right. I think that I think that, you know, as you go through that residency process, right, that it's really like that hardening process, right? Because the truth is, we recognize that a lot of it has to do with your approach, how you process information, how you're looking at people, in kind of your problem solving, right? What people fail to realize is that process that is kind of innate in a physical therapy kind of pattern recognition, right, is incredibly useful in almost every other discipline of professions, right? Whether that's management, whether that's looking at systems, whether that's looking at and just kind of everything, because that approach really gives you a clarity of looking at a problem, understanding what caused the problem, and then understanding what's my approach of how I'm going to make this better, right? So as you kind of solidify that mindset and kind of that mental kind of approach to how you're going to solve the problems in whatever residency discipline that you kind of pick, understanding that like you're so far and above what the typical person's approach is that it is very applicable to all kinds of levels, right? So that means you're going to look at things differently than the new graduate or somebody with 5 years of experience or even 10 years of experience, right? Because you've had that hardening of your approach, right? And it's incumbent upon you, right, to kind of show people what that looks like, right? And understand that when you've gone through that process, right, and you are in that upper 2%, that there's some responsibility to show that to the next generation of people who kind of go through that. And then eventually, right, as you kind of grow in that, and then you decide maybe you want to get outside of the clinic, right? Maybe you want to get outside of the brick and mortar. You want to look at other opportunities, whether that's, management and maybe a healthcare system, right? Or maybe that's management in a nonprofit like I'm doing right now, or maybe that's working in, for a league, right? The things that you have learned along the way have prepared you so well for those positions. You vastly underestimate it. And I think that that's the biggest thing that I would say to people.
I just have to jump in and say, Drew Contreras works at a nonprofit, a local nonprofit. I think that is just the best way to describe your experience. After starting the PT program for Delta Force, being a colonel in the military, now he just works at a little nonprofit. I just think it's
however you approach it.
That's right.
I love it. And you also have, I think, Obama's personal cell phone number, probably.
I mean, let's not go there, but it rings sometimes. Yeah.
One of the things that I would caution about with any program is, I have seen enough young grads who came out and said, hey, I don't feel comfortable practicing yet. I want to go get some advanced education. And they go do it. I'm thinking of my friends who've gone through the Kaiser residency here in Northern California. And they came back and they were like, I did not need that, but now I'm really good. But I feel, reassured that I can go out and practice the way I want to practice. I think it's easy to get any advanced degree or advanced training and not, as Drew is pointing out, sort of consummating that training in your environment, utilizing it and showing its utility. It's always, if you love your job and just want to be better at your job, go get residency training, go back and do your job. That you've killed it, you've landed it. But theoretically, it is incumbent upon us to then say, hey, now I have this advanced training. Where am I going to show those skills? And just getting the training, the number of advanced, PTs I have with, residency trained that I know are considerable. And yet I would say that thing was important because it allowed them to take the next step and to differentiate themselves and again, my entire just blind spot and filter everyone is that I, really am in population health and in high performance. Those are my two lanes. So everyone else here who is, I don't even know what an ICD 912 code is anymore. Is that where we are? Those things give me the jeebies, but it does allow me to say, where can I take this experience because I've had this advanced training? The real question is, in our residency, are we doing entrepreneurship training? Where are the next follow-along pieces? How are we going to set ourselves apart as a group so that someone can say, oh, I now can go get this elite care. I can go get care that has been differentiated from the box down the street with a lot of new grads, seeing a lot of people. And that we're seeing more and more in the physician world, this private equity has come in and completely screwed up medicine. And we're really, the AMA and the physician groups, there's now a physicians group out there, I don't know if anyone knows, that is 100% against PE. And the whole thing is, we're not working with private equity, we have nothing to do with private equity. So I think we have this opportunity to say, hey, you've now come through, there's a consciousness change, there's a skill set level up. How are we going to now say, I want to practice differently, which is theoretically why we got into residency programs in the first place.
And that's I think a great segue into the second question that we had posed for this webinar in general, which was, you finish the residency program and you look around and you go, okay, what's changing, right? Like, what's next? What's going to happen next? And for high performing PTs to stay in the field of PT, because we're seeing a mass exodus, almost disproportionately more in those who have achieved higher levels of education. What I'm hearing over and over is that they want control over their time, control over their earning potential, their income, and control over their passion. They get to spend more time doing the things that they like best. So what have you guys seen, and Drew, we'll start with you this time. What have you seen as some inspiring examples of people doing just that, of taking control over their time, their money, and their passion once they've gotten to that point in their career where they're looking around going, am I going to banking now? Am I going to real estate, or am I staying in PT?
I think, right, I think that there's one kind of like elephant in the room that I want to address with people, right? And that is, the whole like imposter syndrome thing, right? So here's where, a lot of times I'll have conversations with people and they'll be like, they'll be asking me for kind of like career advice. And they're like, well, I worked here, I kind of cut my teeth here, and then I did a residency and fellowship, and then I was doing this thing, and then I was doing that thing, and now, I kind of want to pursue some stuff, but I'm just a PT, right? That's the first thing they say, right? And so I'm like, well, what does that mean? Why is that your limiting factor, right? And they'll kind of like, well, I'm not a this or I'm not a that, right? And a lot of times I'm like, okay, so let's have this conversation, right? And this is what I would share, right? And so, I get, I'm going to try to stay off my soapbox here, right? But I challenge anybody to find another healthcare professional that can provide the scope and depth and breadth for caring for human beings in a neuromusculoskeletal problem without surgical intervention. Like there is not one. There is nobody else that is better at this than our profession, right? And we also know that like 70% of things that show up in a physician's office are something that we can impact and take care of, right? So like the data's out, it's all known, right? But the sense that like we're not enough to do that is just bizarre to me. It's bananas because, I lived in a world and practiced in a world where that was kind of the expectation, not a aspiration. That was your job. That's what you did. So when I transitioned out of that into the civilian world, where I'm like, people don't do this all the time. This is abnormal. Staggering to me, right? Because look, I think I'm a pretty good PT, but I promise you, like whoever's on this call is probably a better than me, right? Right? They are more honed in than I am. Like, so if I can go and do those things, right? If I can work in these elite areas and I can work in the White House and do all these things, right? And I don't have the skill set that these guys have, it's ridiculous to think that any of these individuals who have been through these programs don't have the chops to do it. So I think that's the first thing you just have to kind of get past that, right? And once you get past that and you realize that you're enough, that you belong, right? I think what the biggest limiting factor tends to be is people are not sure where to start, right? So like you said, like I have this passion, whatever it is, and it looks different. And I think that people are not encouraged to go out and just talk to people, to just, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. We'll find somebody who does that and talk to them, right? You'd be amazed. I have never turned down somebody who was like, hey, I'd just like to talk to you. Hey, I'd like to get some of your time, right? I absolutely have never turned down somebody when there was a beer involved, right? So, right? So all I'm saying is that like, if you have the desire, there is the network of people who are doing that and been there. And if you're not willing to go out and make that effort, you're not going to get it. Right? But it's there. It's there for you, right? Like you said at CSM, right? You could just throw a stick and hit somebody who's done what you were looking to do, right? It's there for you, but you have to accept that you're enough, right? That you belong, right? And that it's reasonable for you to kind of go do those things. And that's it.
If you have a sort of hierarchy of needs, really what we're seeing is, and to call out sort of the type 1 error in our thinking, it may be that you cannot practice the way you want to practice. It may be that you can't have the time, the control, the population in the current system the way it's iterated. It just may be that there are too divergent at this point for us to say that, hey, I'm going to stay, I'm going to take this Medicare, I'm going to work in this sort of managed care system where I need to see this many people to be profitable. It may be that you cannot work in that system and have these aspirational sort of feelings. That may be the case. It may be that you are working in a hospital doing inpatient right now. You've gotten this residency and you're going to go back and take a leadership role because you have this advanced training, because that's your jam, and those are the only places you can do this. But if that's not the case, then you have to think, what are the other options available to me? What does that look like? Is that home health care? It allows me to have more time so I can start my own clinic, or I can start my own consulting business, or I can start my own, because I think what I hear from people is saying, hey, I want more time and autonomy. And I'm like, well, great, you're going to have to create that for yourself. And that may be you need to put a table in a gym and start that thing at a hyper local level. You heard me at CSM talk about hyper locality. A local physio on the ground, she knows the people, knows her populations, knows their environment, has all the context more than any international Hinge, Kelly Starrett, anyone. It doesn't matter. I'm not on the ground. I don't know what this person needs except you do. So how then do we leverage your local hyper locality, the idea that you are a hyper local person who understands the people around you, and build a business that, number one, meets your needs, that is sustainable, that pays you in a way that you're stoked to be. Look, let me be totally honest. There are some, I saw a friend, a neighbor this morning at 9 o'clock in the clinic. You know, he's overextended, can't ride his bike. He's been dealing with it for 6 months, seeing shitty PT down the street, gave him some crappy exercises, right? I'm like, that's not PT, bro. Like, you just did the easiest thing and you didn't call your friend. And he's like, why didn't everyone talk about this? I'm like, it's because you didn't, my point is, this was a simple problem. And the only reason I saw it is he's my neighbor and my friend. Otherwise, shoot me in the face. This is so boring. Give me the complicated meat. I want to solve I want the hard stuff. This is easy stuff. But that may be the thing that pays you, allows you to handle the door, keeps the rent on, while you're also continuing to work on building the side thing. That thing where I saw him is in my gym, which is in my, my warehouse that I've rented to make films and do the podcast and write and do all the things we're doing. So keep in mind that I understand that's a big leap, Kelly, from saying start, day one, have a residence, day two, go rent a garage. But what I'm saying is put open the opportunity that in your brains that it may be that we cannot meet your current needs the way the system has currently evolved. We have hyper experts, badass men and women, PTs doing their thing. And it may be now that you really have to go out and create an alternative model that drags the other model along with us. And we are starting to see that. We're starting to see that the PTs who said, hey, I think there may be a different way to practice a little bit in this hybrid model. You can still have a day job. You can still go moonlight. You can do whatever you need to do. But I would just propose that you may feel crazy because you are out of phase with the way the system has been and the way our PT education has traditionally prepared us to go be cogs in that machine.
I love that. And there's a question in the chat that I think is right along the lines of what you're bringing up, Kelly. They're asking, where are these grads working? Can you give some examples of these novel models that you're starting to see? Obviously, you've done many of them yourself. Drew has as well. But I'd love to at least prime the conversation with some examples of neat ones that you've seen.
Yeah. So Movement X is an interesting company if you've not heard of them. It's a couple of grads who decided that they didn't like the restraints of their current practice patterns, right? So they basically created this mobile concierge minus is what I would call it, right? It's not like a true concierge practice, right? But where they meet their people where they are, right? And maybe that's at their, at the park where they're doing their Tai Chi, maybe that's in their gym or whatever, right? So that's a model that some people have done that is just kind of shows that look, they're just scaling it out now, right? It's only been a couple of years and they're just kind of sorting through it and figuring it out. And there's no reason that any single person on this couldn't have done that, right? Any single person on this, right, can go, to Kelly's point, right? You can hang your shingle wherever you want. The thing that's really, really interesting about PTs, right, is your license is what gives you your freedom, right? And when you work for somebody, and you give them your license number to bill under, right? That's your value. The value proposition is that I have a license number, right? That I am certified that in the state of wherever I'm at, that I can do this thing, right? That also makes it super easy for you to set up your own business. Like no effort whatsoever, right? Just go fill out the forms in Virginia and boom, you can set it up, right? And so you're really kind of only limited by, to Kel's point of like, what are you willing to do on the side of what you're already doing, right? So I think that, you know, you probably can't shake a stick if you just kind of start looking at who's kind of doing these one-off things and kind of wherever it is that they're enjoying it. But I think there's lots of options out there.
One thing I would add to that,
Yeah.
and sort of dovetailing my last statement, is asking if you want to just be in a reactionary position, then, and that's what PT has traditionally been. I wait and I have no input in how someone moves, trains, recovers, breathes, go through their day to day. I wait until it's so bad that they've had to take a day off, get a referral from a physician. Maybe they know you, maybe they don't. You can see that I'm at the tail end of a lot of decisions, hoping that people find me, hoping that I get chosen for the kickball team. For me, what I found early on was that I really loved having a much tighter connection, getting the squat rack much closer to the treatment table, so that people saw that PT was an active verb, that seeing my physio coach meant that I could improve my performance when I wasn't injured, when I didn't identify as having an impairment that didn't allow me to occupy my role in society, or have, you know, my back pain is so bad I had medical emergency, just that, hey, your knee was hot after running. That meant that I also didn't want to just wait around and have no input into the way that person moved, trained, coached. And that's why initially I saw an extension of my gym as that I could offer a complete solution to this person's problem. We could get them independent, we could see them as a physio, but then also I could walk in and say, here's how ongoing care is going to be in performance. And by the way, I need you to talk to this person nutrition because you're eating like a spoiled brat and it's making everything more complicated. And by the way, can I see your, so suddenly what we see is in that 30 to 45 minute session, which we're typically running into people, how much influence am I going to have? I now can mobilize and crack and grade 5 and do my secret ninja squirrel technique. But if I'm really interested in having a much bigger impact and start playing offense and not just reactionary defense, then I need to think about what my practice is going to look like. And I certainly can be part and just wait around in the, you know, until a coach says, hey, I need you to see this physio. That works just fine. But the most successful models, I can't tell if it's a physio, if it's a coach, if it's a performance, if they're on the field. I can't tell what their job is. They just happen to be trained as physios going into that job. And for me, the writing and most recent work we've done around public health is just a further extension of saying, hey, I think that these things were 20 years in the making. We just had you sit on the floor and eat some fruits and vegetables and get some sunlight. And maybe we could put some of these things to rest before you saw me and you were a dumpster fire.
Yeah, I got my 800 grams today, Kelly.
He's referring to, we are huge advocates of trying to eat 800 grams of fruits and vegetables every day. I am so pro micronutrients and fiber. I sound like a 50-year-old man. Oh wait, I am a 50-year-old man.
It's game changing. I love that book, by the way, and I've recommended it to many people. So well done. I wanna play off the last comment you just made, Kelly, about this notion of really managing population health. We've talked as a profession a lot about being primary care providers of musculoskeletal health. And, you know, Drew brought up earlier, really taking up the mantle.
We are not primary providers of musculoskeletal. We are primary reactionary providers of musculoskeletal health. That's very different.
It's a great point. And my question was going to be with Drew's comment about wanting to really take this group, especially taking up the mantle of leadership. How do we move our profession from where we are now to actually become legit primary care providers of musculoskeletal health? Again, with this group as the leaders.
So I think, right, the first thing I will say, right, is in a professional setting, how do you introduce yourself, right? Do you say, I'm Dr. Drew Contreras. I'm a physical therapist. When you meet your patients, you say, hey, I'm Dr. Contreras. I'm your physical therapist, right? Or do you say, I'm Drew, right? So number one, right? And while I understand the personalization of being on a first name basis or whatnot, right? But when level setting that you're a doctoring profession is important if you want to be seen in the eyes of the public as somebody who can fulfill that role, right? And so I like, have you ever met a chiropractor who didn't tell you their name was Dr. So-and-so? No, right? Like my eye doctor is Dr. Tim, right? My dentist, right, is Dr. Panay. Like they have no issues, right? What is this aversion that we have to accepting that role, right? Like you've all been beat mentally, right? You've been squeezed financially to get there, right? You have, and then decided, let me do some more of that in a residency. And to not accept that, right, is the number one problem. The number one problem, right? So the number one reason that the APTA has not been able to kind of push this to the forefront is because of physical therapists. Not because physicians don't want it, that there's pushback from nurses, that there's pushback from other professions. It's because I think that our profession struggles with accepting this mantle of responsibility, right? So I think, right, and I think the other thing is like, you know, if there's an emergency, like I got a story for you guys, right? Like I'm at the ACC tournament basketball game with my daughter, right? And we're watching a game. I get up to go get a drink or whatever, right? And some guys having a seizure, right, in the stands, and they're like, "Oh my God, we need a doctor," right? I go over. Would you go over or would you not? Would you say, "Well, I'm a physical therapist"? Like it doesn't take, you don't need to be a cardiothoracic surgeon to be like, oh yeah, seizing hunched over a seat, like maybe we should just get you on the floor instead of that, right? Like accepting that that's part of this role and accepting that you can fulfill that, right, is really kind of just at the core of the problem, because it's not a matter of understanding, it's not a matter of knowledge, it's not a matter of skill set, it's a matter of, are we okay accepting it? And especially, right, when you start talking population health, right? And I'll just kind of defer to Kel on that one, but understanding like the role that you're asking to fulfill in kind of those settings. And Kel, I'll let you jump on that one.
Well, I'll tell you, let me piggyback on your story and double click there for a second. So there's this local basketball team called the Warriors in Northern California. I don't know if you ever heard of that. We've known their strength staff, their performance staff forever. We consult. They had two strength coaches for a while, and one of them was a DPT and a strength coach, and the other one was my friend Curtis, who was a young kid. Curtis was a genius. They realized they need to change the organization, and they have two strength coaches, and which strength coach got the head job? Which strength coach was better? Curtis was better, but which strength coach got the job? The strength coach that could see the rehab, understand surgery, how to progress that and regress that, all the training, how to identify. And Curtis was really bummed out. And I said, you know what the problem, Curtis, is? You're not a physical therapist. And if you're serious about being really good at this, you need to go to PT school. And he did. And now he is the director of performance for his women's basketball team in New York. And I'll tell you, the only reason he has that job is now he is competent in both those things. And so what I want to point out is that this opportunity that we have to take that next step is being in those leadership roles because we qualify for them more effectively. We are in these positions. If you're interested in public health, go get a master's in public health. Go work alongside the people who are doing the kind of interesting public health things you want to talk about. And what you'll see is physio taught us a way of understanding the world and understanding humans in the world. And it's the best primary education you could possibly receive. I have zero regrets about my education. But from day one, I was like, oh, the tools that I've been given to now, I wrote a letter. I hope I get picked by this hospital for my first job, and that's outpatient. I, did my final, clinical rotations, and they're like, you're not even going to apply. And I was like, hell no, I'm not applying. Like, I'm going over here because this thing is so white hot that I can take it now and drop it and create my life. And I think I understand student loans are real. I had them. No one paid off my student loans. It was me. And the grind was real. And I will just tell you that this thing allows us to now be creative in the thing that we want to do. And it may be it takes you a year or two to get that in, but tonight start your, write your life brief. What does my day look like? Is there some bullshit there? Yes. What kind of people do I work with? What kind of associates do I want to have? People will bankroll you and back you. And really, you're going to have to start there and work backwards, especially if you can't see a place you want to go. So I challenge everyone on this call right now, put in the chat the name of your dream location where you've seen, you're like, I can't wait to get a job there. And I guarantee you it's going to be empty over here because you're like, there's no way I'm working there. I know too much. Oh, I know that PT. All those people are browned out, right? There may be only one or two places here. Please, someone put in the chat the dream job that you're going to go knock on. But it turns out you may have to be that person who starts that thing and holds the door open for the physios behind you, which is exactly what we did. We had a gym, but when we closed the gym, Indianapolis Colts, right? There you go. You want to work with them. That's the kind of place you want to go. That's where you have to go. So the rest of the time, but the Colts there may not be a traditional PT model. And it may be that you've now chosen the only thing out here is a model or a physio, a place that has physios that does not actually treat physios or treat traditional people. So again, if you can't be in that cult organization, where are you going to go? So, I mean, I think that's, if you want to work national dance, notice that none of the things here we're starting to see, high school, dance company, cults, those aren't physical therapy businesses, people. They're the places where experts go to do the kind of work and performance that we're hoping. And I think that's what I hope to drive in, is that all of our models where we may be paying ourselves, feeding ourselves, being educated, may not be the places where we think we can insert the largest lever and make the most change.
And the one thing I want to just say too is that, like, there's this sense, right, that somebody's going to come help you do this, right? And there's a saying we had in the military, right? Like, nobody else is coming. It's up to us. Like, you're the only one there. There is no cavalry. There's no like, oh, well, Drew's going to show up and Drew's going to do this for me and Drew's going to get me an interview and Drew's not going to do any of that, right? It's up to you, right? Like, it is literally up to you and your sphere of influence that you have, right? There's nobody coming to do this for you. But to the point I hope we're kind of saying out there is that, like, these are all options, right? And there's always the saying of, right, like, if you're going to bet on anybody, bet on yourself, right? Bet on yourself and your own ability to kind of grit through what it is that you want. By all means, right? Get advice from other people. Like I said, right? I'll never turn you down for a beer if you want to have a conversation about something. But, like, it's there, but, like, nobody's coming to do this for our profession, right? And just to hammer down that point, like, if you've been through these residencies and fellowships and you're kind of on this call, right, you are the 2%. It is up to you. You're the ones who need to kind of make this happen, right? It's not, don't wait for, like, somebody else to come do it for you. It's on you.
And it may not exist yet.
And that doesn't mean you can't make it, though.
100%.
I love this. And so what I'd love to see with the people who are on, the chat is open. You have two of the world's experts here to answer your questions. So please, please, please fire away. First question, do you feel like PTs with high-level experience will continue to exist more in the entrepreneurial or private practice space than they do within hospital-based systems? The hospital-based systems meet the need for community at large, but seem to hamper our ability to reach those that our skills would be best suited for or be highlighted by the system at large. What do you guys think?
Well, I think, right, like, if you look at any person that is a highly skilled specialist at anything, I don't care what it is, right? Anything that right, if you are the best person that can throw a football, all of a sudden you're super valuable, right? And I'll say that for myself and my sphere of the world that I'm in, right? Like I'm good at a few things, right? And that makes me valuable to certain people, right? They want access to me because I can do things that they value. So as long as you've understood that, right? And you have that value proposition 100% in the entrepreneurial private practice space, right? That's exactly what you are, right? Now, it doesn't mean, right, that you can't, you must be able to see the broader picture, right? You got to be a really good generalist as well, right? So you can't like just forget everything, right? That'll kind of expose you to some problems, right? But I do think that absolutely, right? The more expertise you provide, the more invaluable you become. Period.
And a follow-up there is, have you been in a hospital where you said, holy shit, this is the hospital I work at? Because I've been in one or two of those, and they both rhyme with the elite military hospitals in Bethesda, or they're elite military hospitals in San Antonio, where we're seeing Center for the Intrepid, right, where we're seeing the most cutting edge interdisciplinary. And those are the places, those are the two hospitals that I work in. So keep in mind that this hospital is not set up for innovation. We have to prove that our model or the thing that we want to do is better. And that may mean that you're going to have to entrench yourself and make change, which is what we're seeing senior leadership doing. We'll both be out at the high performance optimization summit, and with the military, it's the biggest sort of high optimization summit here at the end of this month. People are making those sort of institutional level changes, and it's harder, and you have to be of the institution to do that. So if you're going to be committed to that because you dream of that change, then commit yourself to the institutionalism and institution and make as much change as you can. And you're going to have to show your work, and you're going to have to show people that ultimately comes down to saving money. The other model that I have found to be successful in my current experience, again, this is my own meager experience, is that when I work outside the system, I can show and prove a model that works, and we can drag that system along because they may not be able to innovate within a current system in the institution, the bureaucracy. But what they can do is say, okay, that works over there. We're going to take that or grow that. So keep in mind that you can simultaneously be doing both things. And that's a very sophisticated, long game. Full transparency, I went and did spoke at the combined sections meeting, did one of the big combined lectures a million years ago. And I sat in that room and said, I will never come back into this room again. It has nothing to do the kind of practice I'm engaged in. And it wasn't until, I've known Drew for a long time, until Drew took this position and said, hey, we are now changing from within and we need your help. And in the meantime, I didn't just wonder why I wasn't picked on the kickball team. I was just getting busy doing my own thing, creating the life I wanted, doing the kind of work I wanted. And that is what got me noticed by Drew. And so simultaneously, it would take me a long time to work inside the system to drag it into some other thing. But what I tried to do is say, hey, I think there's some alternative models that this model can go. And that's what we've seen with the CIA, the FBI, the Army, the Navy, the Niners. I mean, literally, I get to see everyone's dirty laundry. And I've never said I want to exist in this institution, but I've said, hey, here's another model that's compelling that you can adopt. And I think we can continue to evolve. It's a long game.
Fantastic. Another question from the group, and I'm going to put these in a slightly different order than they were asked. Lena asked, considering the quality of residency training, do you believe that residency should be required for all entry-level therapists? How do you imagine this would impact the profession?
So I'm gonna give you an answer that you probably are not expecting, right? My answer is no, right? I don't think so, and this is why, right? I think that there are those people that come into our profession and did not come into it with a full understanding of what the profession is. I know that because I've interviewed them, they've worked for me, I've worked alongside them, and I was like, you are in a profession that works with human beings, and you hate people. Why are you doing this? Well, it sounded cool. Well, it looked better than I thought I'd be rich. Like all kinds of stupid reasons, right? Those people do not belong in residencies. They do not belong. They should not be taking up the time of the faculty, right? And look, there's a lot of good that can be done for people giving out yellow TheraBand ankle alphabets to certain people. I go do that. We need people to do that, but I don't need those people taking slots from people who have the burning desire to be better clinicians, because there's not enough residencies and fellowships for everybody. So that's Drew's take on it.
Dylan asks, how, apart from residency, what can be done to stand out from the rest of the competition when it comes to high-level sports PT? You have to speak a strength language. If you are, there was someone earlier on who said, hey, I would love to work in a dance company, right? Then you better speak Pilates, you better speak yoga, you better speak dance, you better speak circus. And if you don't and aren't fluent in those cultures and languages, you will never be invited in. You aren't working alongside and coaching in those things and also being a PT. I think that's the piece. Is then, again, we need to ask ourselves, if it's an ATC-driven model, then listen to this, everyone, this medicalized model, you may not be able to prove your worth as a closed system. You may have to go somewhere else if it's driven by ATCs, or you may have to be the ATC or the strength coach physio who suddenly shows that in the gym, in the training center, we can actually account for all of the sort of trauma related problems. And all of a sudden they're like, why is no one coming to the ATC anymore? Well, turns out the strength coach, who happened to also be a PT, sussed it all out, right? We recovered, we decongested, we did those things in the high performance model. So the two things I'm saying here is, make sure if there's a place you want to be and distinguish yourself, that you are competent in that. And it feels like, yes, I'm getting another degree, but if you can't teach a kettlebell swing and a back squat and a muscle snatch, and you don't know the basics of running and so on, you will never be in those high performance environments. You have to be able to speak those languages. And I have been enough with the Harlequins, who were the greatest rugby team last year ever. I'm on, the PTs are on one side of the table, the strength coaches on the other side of the table. They're fighting each other. I'm in the middle trying to broker a treaty, right? And that's only because I speak PT and injury, and I also speak strength coach. So I think that's where we're thinking, is that make sure that you are, if you want to be in there, you can't just rely on this one skill alone. And that's what we're saying about PT. You will be able to understand strength training very, very quickly. And if you're not already doing those things, I'm a Pilates expert. I speak enough Pilates that I can be deadly, but I don't know shit about Pilates. I could lead a yoga class. Like, I don't know about, Shavasana. But boy, I can lead a yoga class. And more importantly, I understand it. And someone comes to me, I can understand what we're doing, and I can understand how to regress and progress those positions. So just understand, it's going to take a second. Many of you are probably very young and you've just come through and you're like, okay, was that it? Is that all I need? No, it's not all you need. You're going to have to become an entrepreneur. You're going to have to become an expert in another side domain so that you can really flex this deep, deep tunnel that you've just dug.
Fantastic. And I think in the process, you've answered a number of the questions that were in the chat, Dylan's, Zach's as well. So fantastic. Preston followed up on Zach's question. Next question, in the most ideal scenario you can imagine, where do you see the physical therapy profession in 10 to 15 years? That's a loaded one. What do you guys think?
Oh, I got this one, man. Right. Like, so we talk about this, like, accepting the mantle of responsibility, right? In 10 to 15 years, right, PTs should be leaders of a multidisciplinary team, right? That addresses the numerous domains that make up the vast majority of neuromusculoskeletal problems, right? And that means you are the person who's orchestrating the additional mental health needs, the additional nutritional needs, the additional, occupational vocational rehab problems that these patients are having, right? That you're like, but because your background and your education has taught you all those things, you are the ideal person for that. And that model exists now in numerous places. It exists extensively in the military, right? And just like that model in the military proved, like, oh, hey, PTs are actually pretty good at imaging, that carried over. Oh, hey, PTs are actually pretty good at direct access. That carries over. You will see this carry over. This is not a question. This is an inevitability. And the question is going to be when it comes, because it will, have you prepared yourself and positioned yourself to accept that and do that? Or will you then be the person that's like, oh, shoot, I guess it's a master's degree. I can't practice anymore. Oh, shoot, it's a doctorate degree. I guess I can't practice anymore. Or have you put in the time and the work and the effort so that when that opportunity arises, you're in and you're the person, right? But that's the inevitability of where it's going to go because there are not enough primary care managers to handle the vast majority of people, right? And no primary care, no FNP, no PA, right, wants to see the in and out musculoskeletal stuff. That's not what they do, right? They want to know about your fever, your cough, and your chills. So that's our bread and butter, and that's my soapbox, and I'm going to shut up.
That's
Following up on a
amazing.
question from Cole
Go ahead, Kelly.
about one of the things that we find a lot is we actually have to undo the experience of the past. There's a lot of people, organizations, high-level athletes that will not step foot in the PT room because the PT has yanked that person out of their sport, out of their community, out of their tribe, out of their team, and has mired them in rehab-like exercises, correlates for movement, low-level rehab where they become deconditioned, they become less skilled, and they lose their position. Athletes are very, very smart that way. And we see the same thing happen with strength coaches. We're saying, hey, I learned my lesson. This PT isn't part of the team. The best strength coaches are inviting the physios to come work out there. And if not, we need to say, hey, can you coach a bunch of us? You have to show that you speak that language. You go in there and look like a doofus with a barbell, you are going to be swimming uphill in these high performance settings. And again, I my own bias of these high performance settings. So I apologize, everyone. I'm not speaking to your language. But if you go in there with humility and are showing that you know what you're doing and you're working out at lunch and you're going hard and you're doing the language of the place, you'll see that there is going to be a place for you. But we have traditionally trained a lot of the other associates, and they have a long memory of this physio came in and wasn't additive. This physio had her own agenda. He had his own agenda. It was a game. Instead of just saying, hey, how can I help? I drive over one night a week, but I'm usually at Cal twice, and I just run a recovery session for the athletes. And it's open. And now the number of ATCs who come, the number of strength coaches who come, physios who drop in, the teams that are starting. And I literally am like, sometimes I would have 4 athletes show up and I'd be like, well, you 4 athletes are going to get a PhD level education in how your hip works tonight. And it's taken a long time to build the trust in the athletes who are now bringing their friends. So some of this is really consistency. But what I'll say is it really does matter to go ahead and recognize that someone before you may have muddied the waters. I have a high-level coach of one of the best teams will not let her athletes go see the trainer because as soon as they're gone, they never come back. So she does everything in her power to solve the problems on the field around because she learned her lesson. Someone got sucked in, and it's not well-meaning, but it ended up being a catastrophic. So just keeping that in mind is that this is a new paradigm what we're proposing here. And again, it's not just I'm the best PT with the best manual technique and can manage this ACL rehab the best. There aren't that many secret school programs. And so ultimately what we're saying is, hey, you now are the best expert PT out there in your field. Let's go ahead and just continue to build these bridges to create the life that you want for yourself. That's the goal. It's highly selfish.
I hate to do this. We got one last question, and then we're going to have to close it for the night. This one has been brought up a couple times. For those who do want to pursue the vision that you guys have thrown out here, this entrepreneurial kind of start your own thing, like create your own adventure, do you have ideas or suggestions of where they can go to pursue some additional information, some support potentially on this entrepreneurial path?
So, right, like, you know, the selfish plug is that, right, the APTA in the private practice section has a large cohort of people who are doing just this. And it's not just like the I own 15 clinics. It's the I'm just hanging a shingle. I got three people that'll come see me. What am I doing? How do I do this? Right. And that's the first place that I would encourage you to find some people, because not only that, but there's a lot of people there that have already tackled the problems that you will inevitably come to, right? Whether that's business structure, whether that's, am I an S corp, whether that's how the heck did I find myself in this pickle with manpower? Like, how do I scale? Like all those things that, like, if you're passionate, and eventually that's a big hunk of this is making this work, finding those people who have already done this. It may not look the same, right? But a lot of the same lessons can be applied. I would encourage you to go look for some people there.
I'm going to give you two resources. One was at the APTA, Frank Benedetto. That's at Frank_BENEDETTO. Frank Benedetto. And Frank runs and teaches people how to create this sort of a hybrid model. And if nothing else, I'm pointing out, go stalk their pages, go see what's going on. The second is at PT Biz, and that's Danny Matei and Eve. They have plenty of cases, they do mentorship, but again, stalk the resources. You don't have to commit to anything. Go ahead, go to the APTA private practice section, go see what's going on and start to build a framework for, hey, okay, I think I could do this. It feels overwhelming, but it's not overwhelming. It's a small thing.
With
Frank
that, go ahead, Kelly. Sorry.
No, just that was Ahmad says, Frank Benedetto, and he's the honey badger.
With that, I just want to thank you guys one more time. Elite group of people here to hear your message. I'll be sending this out to all who registered, almost 200 people, which is great. You are part of a community of excellence and want to support that. Kelly, Drew, appreciate your time, your expertise, all that you advised, and hope everyone has a great night. And thanks again, guys.
My email is kelly@thereadystate.com. I just put it in the chat. Reach out. Drew's right. Anyone that you want to talk to in our profession, you have eaten so much crap and jumped through so many hoops. We are family already. Just understand, you're like, you come up to me and you're like, oh, PT, we're going to hug it out, because I'm like, I know you and I know what you're obsessed with. So please, thank you so much, everyone. Reach out if we can help.
Yep. Drew
Thanks,
Contreras at apta.org in the chat as well. Be well, everyone.